Today is the first in a three-part series that we're generally calling Teach the Truth. And it will be about challenges that have been made and faced to the extension of learning. Any kind of challenges where some group says, you people over there shouldn't hear about this thing for whatever reason. Next week, we'll be talking about the origins of that type of thought, the idea of limitation of learning. 2 weeks from now, Jeremy is going to be running a larger program, a rally in support of diverse reading materials. And he's got some amazing speakers coming from around the state and locally to speak at that rally at week number 171. So that really should be a wonderful opportunity. That's the Sunday of Labor Day. But today, I'm really happy to welcome back two frequent rally attendees. They are members of the Newtown Allies for Change, Nicole Maddox and Don Lococo. They're going to speak today about keys to an effective movement, the story of defeating a book ban. So please welcome back Nicole and Don.
Hello, Justice Southbury. Thank you so much for having us here. We've been here before and we've spoken, so it's been great to get to know some of you and to just kind of share our story, because it's important in this work that we share our story of how we're doing the work that we do. And it's also important because encouragement goes a long way. As we know, this can be incredibly discouraging. At times it can just feel like you're being defeated, but we have victories. And so today we're here to share about one of those. So just so you know, as it relates to this book ban issue that happened in Newtown, blocking the microphone, sorry. Newtown Allies for Change actually prepared for this for 2 years prior to when it actually happened. I mean, we were actually surprised that it took that long to come to Newtown. Newtown Allies for Change was formed 3 years ago, and we started just looking at what was happening around the country. And so we knew that we were expecting a couple of things. We were expecting the anti-CRT folks, and I'm using air quotes because we still know it was never CRT we were talking about. It was historically accurate history that we were looking to be taught in our schools. And then we knew that at some point the book banners would come. So I think one thing that we've taken from all this is it's important to prepare. And so 2 years prior, we started doing our work. What sort of things were happening nationally? What were people saying? What was the language that they were using? As we saw in the DEI movement, right? They were using specific language that was meant to stir up an emotion in their followers. And it was meant to almost counteract the good work that we were trying to do. And so it's really important, and just know that we started doing that 2 years prior. It's also important to recognize that for Newtown Allies for Change, our mission is to center BIPOC folks in Newtown and in Connecticut. And now, what does that mean? It means that there's going to be a lot of important social justice issues that are going to come to our attention, but we have to recognize, as small grassroots organizations, community organizations, we only have but so much manpower and woman power. We only have but so much time to give, right? And so if we make our mission too broad, we're not likely to effectively hit any of those things, right? So ours is to center BIPOC in Newtown. So when we saw the book ban issue come, we knew that where they were going to start would be with the LGBTQ community, right? But we also understood that where this would go would eventually hit our mission too. So it was important, obviously, to support, but it still stayed on mission because we knew that eventually they would be hitting any DEI-related issue. They were just going to start in a certain place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Don. We're going to talk about the chronological component of this, and then we're going to just talk generally about keys to an effective movement, because we do believe that with Newtown Allies for Change, we have some really strong warriors that have been working hard now for 3 years, and we have had successes, not just in this area, but in others. But again, we think sharing the information is important also.
Thank you, Nicole. So concerning the book ban in Newtown, we found that we were able to find out that it was led by people in the town, some politicians that were in town, and it was the same folks that were opposing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the schools. Unfortunately, our Board of Ed had taken a turn for the worst and sided with the DEI oppressors. This really caused a large issue because the Board of Ed had just recently signed DEI policies and resolutions. Thank you. And as a result of that, they had it in black and white that they stood for. What happened at that moment was that the process, those folks started to object right around 2023. In April of 2023, there was a board meeting that took place, and there was some discussion about book banning actually on social media. And what happened was during that Board of Ed meeting, there were discussions, and it resulted in people sending emails directly to the Board of Ed. And on that list of people that actually sent comments to the Board of Ed, there were only nine people out of 24 people that were actually for banning or for the issue of challenging the two books, Flamer and Blankets. And that's just really telling that there wasn't a lot of people that were actually forcing that. We also had some issues concerning Black History Month. We had some bulletin boards that were set up in the schools, and there was a pushback. There was at one time discussions about if you're going to be doing Black History Month bulletin boards in an elementary school, then maybe next month we're going to have a Blue Lives Matter bulletin board. One school actually had an author be arranged to attend the school and talk about her book. Her name is Janae Marks. Her book is called From the Desk of Zoe Washington. The school board got involved with it, the Republicans on the school board, and they moved it so that instead of a school-wide thing, it was very much smaller, and the author decided not to come.
So we knew that once they started attacking the books that were being brought in, that was our clue that we were now headed into the area of book banning. Anytime, if you know anything about From the Desk of Zoe Washington, it's a pretty benign book. The story doesn't even revolve around much of what they're opposed to, but there was a section in there about the Innocence Project and Black Lives Matter. And so here we go. We went straight from trying to get our bulletin boards taken down, which NAFC actually put up. Again, benign historical information, still wanted it down. We knew that they were headed in this direction, and we know now, as we've seen documents, that there really was this behind-the-scene opposition happening. So what was important for us at that time was to know that something was going down, and also knowing that the Board of Education had rules that they had to follow. So this is where we get into making sure that you're educating yourselves in the midst of these kind of movements. In order to be able to combat some of these movements when your board is being taken over by people who are insisting on tearing down anything DEI related, it's important to know what they have to do. So what we did know was that anytime they had a meeting, that they had to notice that meeting within 24 hours of that meeting taking place. So whenever that didn't happen, we made sure to call them on that. Why? Because we don't want the public being excluded from meetings that may be talking about, nefarious plans, because ultimately that's where that went. We knew that the public had a right to speak at any Board of Education meetings. And so again, we made sure that we had people who were ready to come speak each and every time, even if that wasn't a topic for that particular meeting. We made sure that they understood we are here and this is what we stand for, and the community at large stands for it. We also needed to know, what are Board of Education members saying to each other? You may not think that you have the right to know that, but you absolutely do. They're public officials. They are elected, and they are accountable for their words and their actions. We saw that a lot of public figures were speaking on social media without the required disclaimer, which is, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not as a member of, say, the Board of Education. Because I think that what we also saw happening was this improper use of power. I'm using this in air quotes also, to influence teachers and educators in a way that was not appropriate. But what it instead did was instill fear into the people that were doing the good work. we learned that we, at that point, could not trust our chair of the Board of Education, and that's very unfortunate because she's definitely somebody we had hoped to work with. At one point, we thought that she was for the DEI work, but it became very apparent that there was a political party running our Board of Education, and that's where we knew it was time to step in, and we had to take bigger steps. And so what happened was that we understood that there was a process for objecting to books. We got to know that process, and we followed it very closely as these folks went through each of the steps of the process, which I'll let Dawn speak to.
Thank you, Nicole. So the process incorporated a review at the building level. So if what happened was a parent was saying that they objected to a certain book that was actually collecting dust in the library. The two books that eventually came up were the books Flamer and Blankets. They were told to fill out an objection form because they were following the Board of Ed procedure, policy. And the review at the building level actually made it so that one of the schools was actually took two of the books off of their shelves. The next part was it was further disputed concerning what was going on in the building. There was some additional complaints about it, and so it brought up through that policy a procedure which was called setting up a special committee that would be able to unanimously decide exactly what was going on with those two books. So it's a committee of the principal, academia, the librarian, to actually sit down and go over the book, read the book, and go over details concerning the book. And that special committee for Newtown Board of Ed, it actually decided unanimously to keep the books on the shelves. The Board of Ed should have, per policy, affirmed the special committee decision. Instead, they tried to find a way to control, and for their party to control, what was going on. There was discussion about setting community standards. So the issue of actually setting community standards by a Board of Ed board member, totally ridiculous. The next section is on transparency.
So here we are. We've got the books reviewed. It's unanimously decided that they should stay. So why do we even have an issue, right? Why is there anything left to talk about? They purposely chose books. If you know anything about the two books, and again, this is happening nationally. It's not just in Newtown. It's not just in Connecticut. It's the same books. There are some organizations, Moms for Liberty, if you ever hear a discussion about them. There's a few other organizations, and we knew that they were here, right? We were following who some of our folks were following in social media. We could see the connection. They purposely chose books that had, we'll say, shocking material to some. And they took that material, which would be a couple of pages in the book, they took it completely out of context, and that's what they blasted constantly in social media. They gathered their followers by fear. They gathered their followers with set language that if you didn't look into it on your own, you might be tempted to believe. What we really appreciated, because we sat in when that special committee reviewed the information and decided that the books would stay, one of the members said, I have to admit, when I first saw the clips, I also was shocked and thought, why is this here? And then I read it in context. And she said, context matters. And that is one thing that's super important to understand with any issue that's being decided, right? You can't just take the little bits that you get. You really have to understand the whole picture. So what did we do? Here we are. Transparency is key. All right, this is the key for everything. Making sure that the public knows. Oftentimes, and I don't know if any of you have ever studied or followed the civil rights movement. I studied this in school. Good. And so we recently watched Selma, and we discussed this as Newtown Allies for Change. And even though I'd studied the whole thing in college, it was just so wonderful to see again. I saw the movie years ago too. But they talk specifically about making sure that people see. Oftentimes, people don't join in on what's right until they see it with their own eyes. And so it was super important for us to bring transparency into this movement also. It was important for the media to see. It was important for our neighbors to see. And so we oftentimes would encourage mass participation in meetings that may have seemed mundane. I know it seems like, why am I going to the Board of Ed meeting? Because they need to see us and you need to see them, and we need to keep our eyes on all of this at all times. We learned the power of the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. Throughout this process, whenever we would see something that seemed a little off, we made sure somebody would file a FOIA request. That means that we have the right to see information, to have information that's going on among our public education and our elected officials. And we knew at some point that that information would be the key to our success, and it was, and we'll get to that in just a second. Lastly, it was just about making sure that the Board of Education also heard from the public. And so we understood what the majority opinion was. It may have been a couple of people filing these complaints, but we had an entire district that was for the First Amendment, that was for individual rights, that was for not one group of parents making a decision, for the entire district.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, we were also utilizing every angle. There were letters to the editor that were written. This was actually discussed and encouraged by members of Newtown Allies for Change. This is to make sure that people that felt maybe comfortable writing a letter but not necessarily speaking in public, that they were able to participate. That's the idea too, of trying to find resources with your people and figuring out that maybe not everybody can be a public speaker, or not everybody's going to be the perfect writer, but as a team we can come up with a lot of different things. And this actually helped with collaborating too. Since Flamer and Blankets we're dealing with issues concerning LGBTQ rights and with kids' rights. We're talking about the First Amendment right, and I believe it's the 14th Amendment right, which is following due process. We wouldn't let the narrative go. We would press that. We would make sure that in social media we were discussing that that's violating students' First Amendment rights. They have a right to be free. And some of the collaborations that we came up with too, we came up with concerning the sign here. That was with the Newtown Democratic Town Committee. And they actually paid for these signs to put out in front of people's homes. So the message started to get spread. Concerning due process, that was the reason why that special committee was set up. That's the school system's policy. And they were trying to circumvent that. That should have been stopping the book banning, the book challenge right at that moment, but it did not. We had other people that were involved with helping us to get the media and making sure that we kept this topic in newspapers, as well as not just coming from Newtown Allies for Change, and spreading the word. We made sure that we helped the DTC arrange a rally too. Use of media for transparency is extremely important. We want to be able to stay consistent in our messaging, because we know the other side is playing around with messaging. Flamer, and I think it's just Flamer in this particular book ban. That's a graphic novel. Both. Thank you very much, sir. They were harping on the word that it's graphic, thinking that it's graphic content instead of that it's a graphic novel, like comic books. Eventually this got wider coverage, which actually helped for us to continue this whole process.
Yep. A couple other things to bring up, which I think both of us actually forgot, is that while this was all going on, they were using every tactic possible to scare. They called the police on our superintendent, tried to get him arrested for distributing pornographic material to minors, is what they said. They were threatening teachers. I mean, the things that they were saying in social media, it was just awful. It was probably about a 2-month-long process. So just figure every day was something new, and the level of discouragement. But what happened in the midst of all that is that it motivated people to come out. And so our numbers continued to grow and grow and grow. And it was numbers on the right side of history, right? Not on the other side. So this really meant that we were just growing in numbers. The more they tried to discourage, the more visibility it all had, and the more people came out. So that's the other thing, to really remember. So I'm going to wrap up the end of this battle, the final week. So understand there's been a series of meetings that have happened. People are showing up. Every time there's a meeting, they're trying to spin the narrative every single time. Now, all of a sudden, the people that are supporting or who are opposed to the book ban, we are bullies, we're terrorists, you name it. I mean, the language that they were using. We were harassing people. Meanwhile, we're just speaking, okay? And so we had to keep our eyes on the prize and keep remembering why we were there and pay no attention to any of this. So 2 days before the what should have been the final vote, I think Newtown Allies for Change suspected something was going on, and we didn't know what it was. But what we did know is that it was time now for some of our Freedom of Information Act information to go public. And this was not intended to be a harassment of any sort. What it was intended to be was the next step in transparency as we continue to watch a narrative spun time and time again. So that evening, 2 nights before the final vote, we put up a post, which you can see yourself on our public-facing Facebook page. It says the key to democracy is transparency. And there we listed the 9 or 10, it might have been, people who filed these complaints. We put their names there. This was public information. Where they had a connection to any political parties, we put that also. Without commentary, people can draw their own conclusions. And then we put the dates that they filed. And you can see that all of them filed within 3 days of each other. There's no disputing that this was a concerted effort. We said we have concerns about the fact that we have elected officials doing this in conjunction with other people. And that's it. That's all we intended to post. That's all we intended to do. The next morning, we all woke up to quite a surprise, and that is that there was another person who we still don't know who this person is, who also had information that he or she decided it was time to go public with it. The key to democracy is transparency. So this person posted, and you can see it for yourself, underneath our post, screenshots of conversations going on in private Facebook groups where we had at least one of our Board of Education members telling these people how to go about this book ban. This person said, you don't want to say pornographic, you go for sexually explicit, because that's a lower bar to meet. And I think I'm done. All right. This one's still here. Got it. I got it. Yep. All right. I can be loud. And so with that, now we have it all laid out. And as you can imagine, this concerned a lot of people. We also, we knew that at the time that there were other people, other organizations that had been made aware of what was going on in Newtown. The Connecticut Board of Education, the Connecticut Department of Education. They were watching, because remember, the media is involved at this point. And so the next day, as we prepared for yet another FOIA request, because there was some more information that had come out through this, we got word that 2 of our most problematic Board of Education members had stepped down. And the narrative that they tried afterwards is that they were bullied. But we know that what had happened was that the truth had come out in their involvement. It was inappropriate behavior, and we know that. And you know what? We don't need to push that right now, because what happened in that moment and in the meetings to come is that the book stayed, and there we go. So I think the importance is to remember that these battles are going to have a lot of ups and downs, a lot of sleepless nights. But if you continue working, we believe that the truth does shine through, and that at the end of the day, it's going to be folks on the right side of history who have nothing to hide. And those who are trying to work against what's right are going to constantly be trying to hide what it is that they're doing. And so, our final parting words. We talk about what is the key to an effective movement, not just as it relates to book banning, but just anything that we're doing. Right now, we are working with the police department on how to ensure safety for BIPOC in Newtown. We continue to work for DEI-related efforts in the schools. But the how to go about it is common throughout it all. And so the first is preparation is key. We've spent a lot of time educating ourselves as allies to make sure that we understand history, that we understand what's currently happening in the area of DEI, and we try to make sure that we're educating ourselves so that we don't make the same mistakes that we have seen historically, that we're not harming the very mission that we've set out to accomplish. We follow national trends, because I think oftentimes we think, oh, it's not going to happen here. It does, and it will. It's just a matter of when. Be strategic about everything. There were people who knew that we had the information that we had, and they wanted us to publish that right away. That wasn't the time. We knew that a time was going to come where that information would be important. So it's not just about getting excited and having any knee-jerk reactions. It's about being strategic about every single thing, because unfortunately, this type of work takes that level of strategy. And then also just to make sure you're getting ahead of it. You want to take the next point?
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. So what every effective movement needs is the people, too, both leaders and followers. It's important to realize that no role is more important. In other words, too, it's important to recognize that you don't want to try to receive credit. You can't seek credit to be in this line of work. That's when the centering goes off mission. I'm reminded of Joan Trumpauer that spoke to Newtown Allies for Change over Zoom. And she stated that her job during the sit-in in Alabama, that her role was to sit there with a dime at the payphone and be at the ready to call for reinforcements. She ended up sitting at the counter, that Woolworths counter. That's how she was brought into it. Her job started very small but became very big.
I already did timing, so I'll leave that. The other thing which we've mentioned is that language matters. It's so easy to use the same language that they're using. You really have to stop and think, like, is this actually what's going on? They tried it too with us. They did not like the fact that we were saying book banning. They said, we're not banning the books. We're just challenging the books. At which point we constantly and consistently referred to it as book banning, because that was their ultimate goal. On the flip side, right, that's how we get the whole CRT, DEI, they've just tried to turn some of these things into bad things. We have to make sure that we're using the right language. Also bearing in mind that not everybody in this movement is educated, and so oftentimes when you're using language, we've had times where we say, we're not going to say DEI. We're going to say you're opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there are plenty of people who this far along actually don't know yet what DEI is. So it's important to understand that you've got people in a movement at all different levels. So you've got to kind of cater to each of them to make sure you're bringing in people into this movement and educating them along the way. I'll give you this one and I'll take the last one. Almost done.
So part of the process, too, is align ourselves with local leaders who want to do the right thing and stand with us in the movement. Reminds me of a quote here I looked up. John Lewis addressing the Democratic National Convention in September 2012. My friends, your vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful, nonviolent tool we have to create a more perfect union. So using local leaders and stirring up their emotion can actually help promote our mission. And this is how we ensure effective leadership among elected officials. There's also the possibility that rabble-rousers, people that are involved with our group, might actually be involved with politics. Or people that were on the sidelines are stepping up because they've been educated.
And that just brings us to the last point. Be bold. That's all we have. Be bold. There were so many times where we saw, our coworkers getting beat in social media, teachers who had their jobs threatened, parents who had their kids harassed, and it's hard. It's absolutely hard. But then again, you look back to effective movements in history, and what do we see? People losing their lives, people losing their jobs. I mean, it was really bad then, and we can't believe that effective change is going to happen without some sacrifice on our end. So if you're going into a movement thinking it's got to benefit me, it has to be comfortable. I want to see immediate change, and I don't want to be impacted at all. I don't want to sacrifice. This does not work for you. It really requires bold people who are willing to stand up against some nasty things being said to them. But at the end of the day, we remember our mission. For Newtown, it's the center. For NAFC, it's the center by BIPOC in Newtown. For Justice Southbury, I'm sure you've defined your mission also. Stay on mission and be bold in whatever it is that you do. And then you'll find success in your movement. Thank you.